I'm a lawyer and I specialize in getting admissions out of some of the slipperiest souls out there. But what happens when not only is a person really good at evading your questions, but is ready for you and knows what's coming? Let's talk about it.
Mr. Anderson.
Hi, my name is Mr. Anderson and I am mean to people on the internet. I try to be polite about it though, I just tend to ask difficult questions and insist on the answers. Probably not a big surprise because I'm a lawyer. My channel's got a lot of stuff to do with debate. I do a lot of technique breakdowns and isolating different aspects of some of the techniques we use as lawyers to get the right answers. One of the other things that you'll find on my channel is my own debates, where I'm putting that stuff in practice and showing that it does and can work against a resisting opponent. Now, I tend to try and find the toughest customers that I can to show you that this stuff does work. And one of the toughest customers out there, in terms of rhetoric, is a guy by the name of Dr. Kent Hovind. Now, Dr. Hovind's, a doctor kind of in the same way that Dr. Dre is a doctor, which is to say not at all. He doesn't have a legitimate PhD. He does have a PhD that he bought from a diploma mill, but what he is really, really good at is rhetoric. Like, he is really good at arguing. And he can slip away from almost anybody. He even slips away from me sometimes. But he's really a great foil for me to show that when done properly, the techniques that lawyers use to make sure that people answer questions, they do work even against people who are excellent at slipping away. And so, what you're watching right now is my second debate against Kent Hovind. Now, you're more than welcome to go and watch the first debate, and there is breakdown footage of all the stuff that happened in that first debate as well, but you don't need to see that in order to enjoy the analysis of this second debate, because I'll take you back and I'll show you clips of everything that you need to see from the first debate. And there's also an introduction where I summarize what happened in the first debate right at the top of this one. So if you clicked on this just for whatever reason, and you haven't seen that first debate, that's okay. You can just keep watching. The point is, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be doing a deep dive into that second debate, and I'm going to break it down for you and show you guys all the ins and outs and give you my inner thoughts, let you know what I think Kent was thinking, and how all these different tactics play out, and sort of what's happening behind the scenes, so you can kind of get inside this and hopefully learn something that's maybe applicable to your own debates. Because even though I'm a lawyer, all of the stuff that I'm doing is kind of adapted for use outside of the courtroom. Now, the first little bit, as I said, is going to be the introductions. There's not going to be a lot that I have to say in respect of that. The commentary and the back and forth is going to start at somewhere around the 15-minute mark. I don't know exactly when that's going to be, because this is not the last thing that I'm recording, and that's probably enough introduction here. Please do enjoy this debate. It was a lot of fun to do, and I think it's a lot of fun to watch. This is probably going to end up having to be broken up into multiple parts, so this is part one of the analysis of debate 2. We'll see how many parts it needs to be, but lots of stuff to go over here, really interesting stuff, and I hope you enjoy.
All right, here we are. We are live on Standing for Truth. My name is Donnie, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's much anticipated round 2 debate between Dr. Dino and Mr. Anderson. Specifically, the proposition for tonight's debate is, can any living thing bring forth other than according to its kind? And I'm excited for this. Debate number 1 was certainly a debate to remember. There was a ton of feedback on that debate, which is why there is a lot of hype, Mr. Anderson and Dr. Dino, for round 2. And so it's good to see everybody in the audience here as well. Gentlemen, we're going to have a good, clean debate. We're ready to duke it out in the debate octagon. And so with that, Mr. Anderson, let's start with you. Let's hand it over to you. We'll do two things at once. Firstly, brief intro, kind of get acquainted, a little bit about yourself, and then also just jump into some opening words and arguments for us tonight. Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is round 2 of a debate between me, Mr. Anderson. I'm a lawyer in out west, and Dr. Kent Hovind, Doctor of Creationism with a specialty in criticizing evolution. Now, the plan for today is that I'm going to summarize what happened in our debate last time. We're going to talk about whether or not Dr. Hovind found any examples of cancers living outside the body, which is something he wanted some time to check. And then I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Hovind to ask me some questions about any of the things that we touched on last time or that we touched on this time. So by way of summary, last time we made a lot of progress, I think, towards reaching some common ground and tackling the question of whether anything can ever bring forth other than its kind. We talked about some of the basic presumptions that we use when thinking about the world, which we refer to as the October 13th Protocol. And we made some progress towards defining what a kind was. Dr. Hovind said that with sufficient morphological changes, such as growing wings or growing gills, and being able to breathe underwater, and an inability to interbreed with an ancestral population, that can, at least in some circumstances, make an animal a new kind. But he shied away from giving a hard yes on whether that was his definition of a kind. So we have kind of a tentative soft yes with respect to what a kind is. And then Dr. Hovind goes on later in our discussion to give a little more particularity, and he reiterated that according to the Bible, the essential quality of a kind is the ability to bring forth, and that if you're unsure, then see if the animals interbreed, and they'll tell you whether or not they are the same kind. He further suggested that in many ways, a kind is the same thing as a species because the dictionary often lists kind and species as synonyms. So overall, we have a fairly good working definition of the term kind. It refers to a group of animals that are interfertile and usually, though not always, share morphological traits. One test for whether two things are the same kind is if they can interbreed, and the same pen test, put them in the same pen and see if they interbreed, is the ultimate litmus test of this. Lastly, some of the various characteristics or details of the various definitions of the word species can be used to augment our understanding of the word kind if necessary. I pointed out that based on his definition, if we use the same pen methodology, that Chihuahuas and wolves are not the same kind, because Chihuahuas and wolves in the same pen will not interbreed. Most likely the wolves would just eat the Chihuahuas. Dr. Hovind's response was that Chihuahuas are barely dogs and that maybe they could interbreed genetically and that wolves can interbreed with coyotes. Ultimately, despite this being one of the key definitions in one of the core areas of his field of specialty, Dr. Hovind wanted the opportunity to think about things a little more, and so hopefully he can now either refine his definition or get back to us with a hard yes on what a kind is. Naturally, if I'm incorrect in terms of my summary of his criteria for defining a kind, I'm sure he'll correct any inaccuracies. Then we began to discuss an example of something that Dr. Hovind would consider to be a different kind. And Dr. Hovind agreed that if cells in my body decided to become single-celled creatures and live as single-celled creatures, rather than being part of my body, that those cells would be a new kind. Specifically, he was asked the following question and gave the following answer. Question: I want to nail this down. You're telling me that if the cells in my body decided that they're not going to cooperate and be a part of my body anymore, they're going to do their own thing, they're going to live as single-celled creatures, that's a different kind. Those cells are a different kind, right? Answer: I will give that a qualified yes. To my understanding of your question, Your Honor, I think that probably a different kind. Later, I explained to Dr. Hovind that this example was not hypothetical. It in fact describes the process that occurs when a person develops cancer, or at least certain types of cancer, and cited some papers in support of this assertion. Dr. Hovind then suggested that perhaps this did not count if the cancer cannot live out on its own outside the body. I showed him a paper that suggested cancer could be transplanted and live in mice. Dr. Hovind suggested he would like some time to think about this, and so of course we adjourned, as time was long anyways. Now we're back. Dr. Hovind, have I fairly described our interactions at our last debate?
Well, it's my turn to talk. Are you done?
Yeah. No, go ahead and correct anything.
Yeah, before you talk, Kent, I appreciate it, Mr. Anderson. Thank you very much. Kent, take equal time, roughly 6 minutes or so. And so we'll hand it to you. Floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay. First, I have to say hello to Jackie in Indiana, Bobby's sister. Hi, Jackie. She's watching here. Okay. Come on down. That is sort of interesting. Well, multiple things here. I think a wolf and a Chihuahua could interbreed if you genetically mix it. Maybe there's some mechanical problems. The Chihuahua can't reach very high. But certainly I think if you took the sperm and egg from the two different ones, you could get the dogs and wolves are interfertile. Dogs and coyotes and dogs, they're the same kind of animal. A 4-year-old will tell you that. So the Bible says they bring forth after their kind. Joe got some kind of program to type out in word format or in text format. It doesn't always get it right. Okay, you need to understand this is what they call that transcriber. Yeah. Okay. So I didn't have time to mess with it at all. I worked down here for 11. Let's see. So you want to know your answer that if your cells of your arm could disintegrate and go into single cell, would that be a different kind? They'd still be human cells. I don't understand how that has any evidence for evolution. It's still a human cell, and it was still alive to start with. Tell you what, take some dirt out of the ground and make it come alive. I'd like to see that. Okay. So I'll talk about your counterexample, fit the bill, amoebas. You want to get to amoeba? Let's see. This is just from the thing. Well, how is it another cell? Are humans rats? How is it not another kind? New scientists said the mosquito can bite a wide range of animals. So the mosquito can live on, let's say, dog blood, cat blood, cow blood, hamster blood, human blood. Still a mosquito. Same thing with ticks. They live on all kinds of different animals. Same tick. The cancer cell can live in quite a few different creatures, cancer cells. So if you take a cancer cell from a human, put it into a mouse, I don't understand how that's evidence for evolution. Lice can live on all kinds of different animals, cats, dogs, humans, etc. Okay? So your logic is that a cancer cell can grow into a tumor and then break apart, and one piece can now grow in a rat. And that's evidence that all life forms came from an amoeba. I don't understand how you guys cannot see how dumb this is to take this example and say, wow, this cancer cell can be moved to a rat. Therefore, we're all related to an amoeba. Or here we go. Lines on paper with, related to a pine tree. I don't understand how anybody cannot see the stupidity in this. These family trees they put in our textbooks are nothing but propaganda. This is artwork. This is pictures with lines drawn between them. There is no evidence of a human and a bird having a common ancestor. We have common designer, but the textbooks continually say all the many forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organism. This is pure propaganda. Apparently you fell for it when you were schooled and you believe it, or maybe you like to believe it because it gives you freedom from a creator, but it says no traces of those events remain. So it's a loss of function for something to become cancerous. There's lots of studies done on this about how the metastasis process which cancer cells spread from an initial or primary site to a different or secondary site. That happens, okay? Saying, here we go, here we show that metastasis is driven by positive selection for generation loss of function. Scientists have been trying to understand why people get cancer. They come up with a theory that suggests cancer can happen when something goes wrong with the genes that are responsible for keeping our cells communicating. You think degradation of the cells and degradation of the information transmission process, degrading, is going to change an amoeba to a whale and a human and a pine tree. I don't understand how anybody could believe such a thing. Studies suggest they looked at a type of tumor. They found this tumor spreads to other parts of the body. Gene cells are important for keeping cells working together. Do you think cancer is a good thing? I don't think the mouse wants it. I don't think the human wants it. Found the genes used for the tumor were being used less than normal. They're not doing their job properly. So it's similar to how cells behave in the early stages of life when they grow, multiply without limits during pregnancy, go from single cell to a whole baby, 9 pounds, 8 pounds in just a short time. Evolutionary scientists believe that when animals with many cells started to evolve 600 million years ago, there was an increase in the number of new genes that now protect them from cancer. This whole idea, though, that you took an hour and a half of trying to get me to agree to things I wasn't sure I wanted to agree to, trying to trap me into a little box. I think the Bible is clear. They bring forth after their kind. Man has decided it's important to us to put the animals in categories. The animals do not care at all, okay? But we like to put there are 8 different kinds of squirrels, okay? And they can all interbreed. And they probably had a common ancestor called a squirrel. They don't care that we put them in a box called squirrel. They don't even know. But you're so intent on trying to define the word kind in such a way that allows you to make these stupid charts with the family trees with everything related. They bring forth after their kind. My contention is, and I got tons of notes on all this stuff from what little time I had to work on this. My contention is there is no evidence anywhere in the universe of any animal bringing forth a different kind of offspring. Cows make cows, dogs make dogs, cats make cats. There are no exceptions. If one gets a cancer and the cancer cell is able to be transmitted, for heaven's sake, all kinds of diseases can be transmitted through the air. The idea that because a cancer cell can be moved to a different animal, it is therefore now evidence for evolution, I think is insane, okay? There is no evidence of any animal. Is that your evidence is, so far, that a cancer cell is evidence for evolution because it can, there. It can now live in a new host. I think most people are laughing about that. So time's up. Give me your second best evidence.
So what we see here is a tactic from Hovind where he has shined a light on his own incredulity and just essentially belittled the point, and also strawmanned it, of course, because the point is not that cancer cells can live in a new host. The point is that the cancer cell is part of a body that is now living as not part of a body. And of course that he agreed that if something were to do that, then it would be changing kinds. That's the evidence. But what he's trying to do, which is kind of a classic technique, is to sort of misconstrue the evidence on purpose, misconstrue the argument on purpose, and then kind of belittle it, and then try and hand wave it away and move on. So there you can see him kind of clearly going, okay, well, now that one's dealt with, let's move on to your next piece of evidence. And there is a real sort of, let's call it incentive or like, I don't know, impulse in a situation like that to just kind of move on and be like, okay, I've made my point, I'm going to go forward with the next one. But that's not something you can kind of just let lie. So you'll see that I take a different approach here.
Sure. Well, sir, we're not quite done with the first best evidence here today, and I'm actually not even sure it's the best evidence. It's just the first one. Okay. I certainly look forward to our discussion here. So, and to be clear, sir, this is not a debate about whether or not evolution is true or whether or not whales evolved from amoebas or anything like that. I'm not trying to prove evolution right. I'm not trying to prove creationism wrong. I'm just saying you're wrong with respect to whether or not anything can bring forth other than its kind. And whether it's an increase of information or a decrease of information, if it changes kind, it changes kind.
Now, that was a point that I made fairly strongly in the first debate, because he tried to say, oh, well, this is a decrease in information, so it doesn't count. And, my counter was, well, you're telling me that it can't change kinds, whether it's a decrease in information or an increase in information. So, you say it can't go either way. And so it doesn't matter which direction it's going. If it can't move, it doesn't matter that you prefer directions of upwards. If it's going downwards, if it's decreasing information, if things can change kinds by decreasing their information, then that means that things can bring forth other than according to their kinds, period. That's just semantically true. So, this question of whether or not information is a thing or whether you can gain or lose information, that can't and does not enter into it. And I sort of make that point there rather quickly, but in retrospect, I probably should have hammered that home quite a bit more, because I think that that kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
But you know what? We'll get more into that. Let's just let's focus on what we have in front of us here. So the next thing that I wanted to get into here was I had just a few questions about the homework that you were supposed to do about cancer surviving outside the body. And then once you answer those, then it's going to be your turn for the rest of the night if you want. Now, it's about 15 questions unless you're evasive and I have to do follow-ups or rephrase the question or ask it again. And if you don't give me straight answers, that's what I'm going to do.
There's some foreshadowing for you.
So this could be done in like 5 to 10 minutes, or it could take the rest of the night. And whichever it is going to be up to you. Do you understand?
I don't think so, but go ahead.
You don't understand that it's going to take longer if you don't give me straight answers?
I always give you straight answers.
Okay, and you understand that things are not going to be quick if you don't give me straight answers, right?
I understand you're a lawyer. You come from the word attorney, which means to twist. So I'm very cautious about you twisting things. But go ahead, start talking.
All right, sir. We're gonna start off on the right foot. So you're gonna answer my questions and you're gonna answer them straight. You understand that I'm not going to I'm gonna keep asking the question until I get a straight answer. You understand that, right?
I understand that's your modus operandi. Yes, I think I give straight answers. Cows always make cows.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's try and make this as quick as we can.
So this is kind of classic technique here, and what I'm doing is I'm setting the tone, and I'm making it clear to him that I expect his answers, I expect them to be truthful, and I expect them to be responsive. And in the event that they're not, then the question is going to continue, and we're going to go around and around until we get the straight answers. Now, in the context of a cross-examination, of course, I'm entitled to insist on the answer, and I can direct the witness to answer. Here, of course, I can't do that, and so there's more of a social control. But in any event, I can still sort of just say, like, look, nothing is happening. We're not going anywhere else. We're not talking about anything else until you answer the question, right? So, like, it's like kind of like. When you're like driving in your car, in the car, and your kids are fighting, and you're like, "I will pull this car over, mister." It's kind of like that. That's the stick essentially for what I'm going to do in the event that he's not giving me straight answers, and he tests it immediately. You can see even right within the context of the question where I say, like, you understand that that's the way that it's going to be, and he tries to evade it to try and sort of say to me, like, no, or actually, yes, I do understand that that's what you would like, but that's not what you're going to get. And so we basically have a little miniature battle of wills where I say, like, no, look, this is like, and that's what you have to do in a situation like this if you want to get your questions answered, is that on the nothing questions that come right at the start, if the person starts to fight you right out of the gate, which is what's happening here, you have to be ready for that fight immediately, and you have to set the tone, because if you kind of let that one slide and you're like, well, I'll just fight him on the on the critical ones, like, you're not going to get those critical answers, because number one, they're saving their energy for those critical answers too, and they know that if they fight you hard enough on it, and they make it inconvenient for you, that you will give up. So you have to make it very clear that you're not going to give up, right? It's kind of like you're playing a game of chicken, and what you need to do is rip the steering wheel out of your car and throw it out the window to make it clear to the other person that, like, this car is not going to turn. If you don't want to have an accident, then you need to swerve. And that's kind of what's going on there.
So you would agree with me that you have now had the opportunity during a period of just under 3 weeks to research specifically, as you said you wanted to, whether it is possible for cancer to live outside the body, right?
I believe we said I would try to do that. I don't think you understand. We have 30 people on our staff and visitors coming all the time. We're building things. I did not do a thorough job of researching all of that yet. I didn't know that was my homework. Are you the teacher now and you assign homework? I think that cancer cells cannot get a cancer cell and lay it out in the sunlight not in any body. It won't survive. It has to be in a host. The cancer cell the cancerous cell requires nutrients from some kind of host, whether it be a human or a rat or a mosquito. It requires a host. So no, a cancer cell cannot live outside the body.
Well, we're going to get to that, sir. We are definitely going to get to that.
Okay.
But you will agree with me that you have had the opportunity to research that, right?
No, I've had 3 weeks just like you've had. Let's see, I flew to New York. Did a wedding, spoke at a church up there. We had a lot going on here. So I don't think I need to do much more research on it. A cancer cell cannot live outside of a host.
Yeah.
Period.
So you will agree with me, sir, that you did have time. You could have lost an hour of sleep at some point during the last 3 weeks, right?
I could have dropped everything else I was doing and focused on this, but I didn't do it. I don't think I need to.
So you might be wondering why it is that I'm, beating this drum and I'm going on and on and on about, you've had time, you've had a chance to do your homework, and you were supposed to be researching this and you didn't, did you? And, you certainly had your chance. And it seems petty at first, right? But there is a reason. And the reason is that we are going to go into examples that are going to be exactly what he said that he wanted to research. And he is saying, well, there are no such things. And my expectation is that, and was at the time, that he is going to say, oh, well, I never looked at, I haven't looked at that. I'll have to get back to you, right? And it's like, no. You have had your chance to get back to me. You have had your chance to look this up, because that is your classic dodge. In fact, that's the thing that you said at the end of the last debate. Well, I'll have to get back to you on that. Well, now it's back to you time. And so if you don't know now, then that's on you. That's because you're lazy. That's because you didn't do what was expected of you, right? And I'm sort of just setting that's the clear expectation, is that he would have reviewed those things. And the reason for that is that we're going to go through those things, and almost for sure he is going to say, oh, well, I didn't know that, and I can't comment on that because I'll have to have a look at it.
Yeah, and you could have let someone else give any one of the many tours that you gave over the last 3 weeks, right?
Oh, no, that is much more important to me than this debate. My ministry for the Lord, winning people to the Lord, influencing people, much more important than trying to convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced anyway. So,
yeah.
So it's at this moment that I actually had a shot prepared that I decided not to throw. And I think it's interesting enough to sort of talk about the decision-making process that went into kind of leaving that on the cutting room floor. Now, the shot was that, he's saying, oh, I have this ministry, and it's important to me to try and win people for the Lord, and my counter shot would have been something along the lines of, look, this is winning people to the Lord, because all of those people out there, you have 30 people working for you, and they're supporting you, and your job is to defend their beliefs from me. And so if you're not there to do your job, then you're letting all of those people down. You're letting your followers down, because you're just, playing at being powerful rather than actually doing the work of being Dr. Kent Hovind and, doing the academic research that is required and that is expected of you, not by me, but by your followers, because you're supposed to be their champion. And if you don't want to be that, then maybe you shouldn't be scheduling debates. But the problem with that counter shot is that it's too harsh, and it's too early to be that harsh in this context. So, it was something that, I could save for later. Maybe I can use it when he starts talking about Pascal's wager, inevitably. But it wasn't something that it felt right to use in that moment. And so, even though it kind of sprang to mind, and you can see kind of the wheels turning, and I kind of go, and then I just sort of move on. And that's the reason why.
And you could have begged off either your debate with Tom Jump or your open mic night with SFT, both of which occurred over the last 3 weeks, right?
I don't think you run my schedule, sir. What's your evidence for evolution?
Well, sir, before we get to that, I want to talk to you about something. And that's your debate with Tom Jump on October 23rd.
Well, I'm gonna jump in real quick, Mr. Anderson. Firstly, the Tom Jump debate was a re-upload on Tom Jump's channel, so that didn't occur over the last week. Yeah,
All right,
that was from over a year ago.
Never mind then. Never mind then.
So in case you're wondering what was going on there and why that mattered, there was an upload on Tom Jump's channel of a debate between him and Kent Hovind that aired during the period of time between our first and second debates. And in that debate, Hovind said, "Dogs produce dogs every time, no exceptions. No animal brings forth other than according to its kind." And if he said that in a debate, rather than being on his computer researching whether or not that thing was true, knowing that he had a debate coming up, then that's certainly relevant to his degree of preparedness and the I guess moral authority that he would have to say, oh, geez, I needed more time to research that. It would have been a fairly strong point to say, well, you certainly had time to repeat the claim, but you didn't have time to research the claim. And so that's where that was going, but it turns out that the Tom Jump debate was a re-upload and that he didn't say that. And I was watching fairly carefully to make sure if he did say that nothing brings forth other than its kind between our two debates, he was going to get hammered on it. And I thought that he had, but he didn't. Now, has he since? You betcha. So if we interact again on this subject, is that point going to be brought up? You betcha, right? And so certainly, and to everybody else, like, feel free to bring these points up if in the event that you decide out of an abundance of bad decision making and poor judgment to debate Kent Hovind, that yes, he certainly has had time between then and whenever it is that you debate him to research whether or not in fact there are examples specifically like the ones that we're going to go through today where things bring forth other than according to their kind, and whether or not he just says it anyways. But in any event, that's where that was going. But again, I had to sort of adjust there on the fly because, well, it turned out that the fact that I thought was the case wasn't the case. So you react.
And what I do with my time, it's not your business how I spend my time. You don't assign me homework, sir. Now, what's your evidence for evolution?
All right, sir. Look, I was going to try. I'm trying to be charitable to you, but if you want to get into it, hammer and tongs, then we can. So, sir, you didn't.
And here, of course, what I'm referring to, are the things that I haven't said and the shots that I haven't thrown, like the one we just talked about. Hovind has taken the approach, and you can see he kind of like, gives me this and like a, let's fight kind of a thing. And he figures that being combative here and resisting in every little thing is going to be the winning strategy. He's kind of determined that he was too nice to me in the first debate, and so if he can be more difficult now, that will stymie me. So it's pretty clear that that's his strategy, and we'll see how well that works.
And then we can. So, sir, you didn't do your homework, which you assigned yourself, by the way.
I do want to jump in real quick before we continue.
Now, it might seem a little odd for Donnie to pick this moment to jump in, but it's because this lack of preparation is reflecting on him, because I had sent several emails in advance of this saying, I want to make sure, remind Kent that he needs to read those papers that I sent him and he needs to do the research, because when I come in, I am going to expect him to have done it. And so, I'm going to be hard on him if he doesn't have that done. And so, because I had sent that message, or more than one message to Donnie, he's essentially saying, look, like, Kent did something, right? He did have some elements in his presentation which were responsive to your papers. So, kind of don't get mad at me. I clearly told him. I think that's kind of more what's going on here. I don't think Donnie's trying to be disruptive in order to save Kent. I don't think that's what's going on here.
Kent did spend a few minutes in his opening going over the a couple slides dealing with the cancer argument, and so he did put forth some responses, and I'm feeling like we might want to engage those.
Well, sir, here's what I want to engage.
So to some extent here, Donnie is trying to, moderate the conversation, but more precisely, he's trying to steer the conversation into some more comfortable waters and suggest that, I go in a particular direction. But like, this is not an impromptu debate here, and I have a plan, so I'm going to be sticking to my plan, and I'm going to make it crystal clear to both of them that I'm the one driving the bus, because I'm the one who has, thought this through, and that we are going to be dancing to my tune, not his and not Donnie's.
So, sir, in your travels over the last 3 weeks, did you find any examples of cells that could live on their own, cancer cells that could live on their own outside of the body?
Well, I think any cell can live for a very, very short time. You can I banged my head pretty hard today and bled on the ground. I'm sure the blood cells lasted a few minutes or a few seconds. But no, they cannot live a long term outside of a host. Neither can a cancer cell. Do you know of a cancer cell? Do you know of a cancer cell that can live a long time on its own outside the body? Take it out, lay it on the table. How long does it live?
Well, sir, I don't think anything can live very long on a table if it doesn't have food. I mean, I don't think that's even true.
You got it. So that's your assignment now. I'm the teacher. I want you to find me a cell that can live a long time outside the body.
Now, some of you who are biologically inclined are probably screaming at your monitor right now going, say Gila, say Gila. And Gila, by the way, is an example of a cancer cell, specifically a cancer cell, which can live a long time outside the body. In fact, indefinitely outside the body. And I know that, and I knew it at the time, but you'll notice that I don't just drop that on him like a repost. I go through the work of setting it up, because he's also created this strange ambiguity where he said something to the effect of, don't give it any food. And of course, HeLa cells, like any living thing, need food. And so we need to clean that up, and we need to make it clear that, the thing that I'm going to be giving him, once I give it, does satisfy his test. So this is a good example where I talk in one of my videos about crossing the T, where now I see that he's about to run into a wall, and I'm trying to wall things off. And ultimately, in this situation, what's going to end up happening is that, so he's got three choices, right? He can just kind of run face first into the wall. He can turn, in one direction and agree with me and give me my admission, or he can turn in another direction and kind of look faintly ridiculous. And what he decides to do here is essentially just run into the wall.
We all make choices, but that was a choice.
Okay. Now, if I do that, let's say first, let's clarify this. So, I want to clarify my assignment. So, now what you mean, because like I said, even if you put bacteria in like a completely sterile environment, it's going to die. That's why they put it in a petri dish, and it's got that brown stuff on the bottom. It's called agar. It's bacteria food, right?
Right.
So a bacteria is going to need that to grow. But I mean, what I'm understanding you're asking me for, what I understand my assignment to be, is not like, let me put it this way. And I checked this, right? You can't grow steak in a petri dish, right? Like if you put a tissue from a multicellular creature in a petri dish with agar, it's not going to grow. It'll just die. And that's generally true of cancerous tumors too. And I think that's what you meant. The cancerous tumors do not persist and reproduce in a petri dish like bacteria do.
Right.
They need a blood supply. They need all that kind of stuff. And if you treat those tumors like they're bacteria, they're going to die. That what you meant?
So you see what I've done here is I've almost, I think the term is steelman. I've kind of steelmanned his objection, right? I've kind of given that objection kind of the best version of itself to try and make it as, as robust and reasonable as possible. Because, saying, oh, like you can't feed it and it's going to die, or put it on a table and it's going to die like that. That's kind of, it's a little stupid. It's a little silly. It's a little vapid to say something like that. So what I've tried to do there is kind of say to him, look, I think what you mean is that when you, and he, if what he's saying is that, you can't grow steak in a petri dish, that you can't keep a heart alive indefinitely by just hooking it up to a machine, that it needs to be part of a multicellular organism or it's just going to die. Like, that's correct. And it's true for cancer cells too. Like, interestingly enough, if you take almost any cancer cell and you just put it in a petri dish, and you give it nothing but, agar, like it can't live on the agar. It needs to be like part of that larger system. It needs to be part of the organism. It needs all of those things. And so, I tried to suggest to him a reasonable position, because if he takes that reasonable position, then I have a counter to that reasonable position, right? And of course, if he doesn't take that reasonable position, then he's kind of deliberately and of his own volition taking an unreasonable position, which would be crazy for him to do. So of course he's not going to do that. He's going to take my reasonable position, and we'll be able to go forward from there. And that it's just a lot easier and faster for me to give him the reasonable position than to try and make him come up with it on his own. So that's what I did.
I answered your question without taking any time away from my ministry or my wife or my family or anything. I answered your question. Cancer cells cannot live outside of a body.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that a cancer cell from a human can't live in a petri dish. Right?
No, you put it in a petri dish, you're giving it nutrients.
Yeah, well, you have to give bacteria nutrients, right?
You can't.
So everything. You're treating it the same as bacteria.
Any living cell needs nutrients from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Your question was, can it live outside of a body? The answer is no.
Right.
So next topic, please.
So you can see what he's done here. Instead of taking sort of my offered reasonable position, is he's decided to kind of just double down and say something that wasn't entirely responsive to the question and didn't entirely make sense. But was frustrating and kind of went around in a circle. And so he's essentially kind of declaring, like, look, remember that thing that you were talking about before where you're going to keep asking? Like, I'm going to make you keep asking, and I'm going to just tell you that, you need to move on. And I'm telling you, like, you might as well move on, because I am not giving you anything. I am not giving you an inch. I'm not even going to admit that it is crazy for me to say that, everything needs food to live. So, you know what? You might as well shout at a brick wall. So a lot of people might move on from there and just go on to the next topic. Let's see how I handle it.
Yeah, no, not next topic, sir. I want to be clear. You said you want to assign me some homework. You want to ask me to find an example of cells that can live on their own, and I'm assuming you mean in a petri dish. Just like a bacteria,
in a sterile environment, because you're still feeding them.
A sterile environment. Sir, if you took a human baby and you put it in a sterile environment, you didn't give it food, you didn't give it anything, is it going to live?
No.
So how stupid is that example?
I think it's stupid.
You need to give it access to food, right? For it to be a fair example.
I'm going to jump in because.
So remember how I told you, he gets steered down a path and eventually he's going to reach, a T intersection where he's going to have to make a choice to go either left or right. But there was a third choice, which was like just immediate brick wall. Well, to my surprise, Hovind in this situation decided to choose immediate brick wall.
We all make choices, but that was a choice.
And just kind of go, no, I meant not the reasonable thing that you were suggesting to me, but in fact that I'm looking for you to provide me with an example of a living thing that does not require any nutrients or food of any kind. And I just want to beat my face against that brick wall immediately. And so I'm just kind of calling him out. I'm going, how stupid is that? To say that, like, I mean, you look ridiculous, and you look ridiculous immediately. And so then Donnie does have to come, and he is in this situation sailing in to sort of rescue Hovind from himself.
There's a little bit of crosstalk there. I just want to make sure, I do appreciate it, gentlemen. I do want to make sure that the audience is hearing all the relevant points. So Kent, if you could reiterate or finish your thoughts there, then we'll throw it back to you, Mr. Anderson.
So he throws it to Kent, so now Kent can change the topic. Now I'm going to have to respond to whatever Kent says, and so now that's how he can allow Kent to drive the conversation. But here in this situation, Kent's so committed to this point that he knows this. Like they do this dance all the time, but for whatever reason, he just can't seem to shake this. So watch how this kind of plays out.
As I said several times, I'll say it one more time slowly. A cancer cell cannot live outside of a body. It has to have some kind of source of nutrients. You want to put it in a petri dish. That's the surrogate mother for a short time so it can still get food. No, it cannot live without that. I answered your question. The cancer cell cannot live outside of a body unless you want to artificially keep it going. You have to give it food. So I did my homework.
And I just want to be clear, sir. I was understanding you to like, because you are correct in that if I take, any given cell from my body and I put it in a petri dish, it's not going to live. It's going to die pretty quickly. And I thought that's what you meant. Is it not?
Look, here, for context, here's what he actually said in the first debate.
Good point. I'll do some research on, is a cancer cell able to live on its own? I'm not aware of any that are. I think they always require a host to save a person's life.
Sure, but they also study cancer to see if they can prevent it. And one of the things they studied was
right. So when they cut the cancer out, does it keep living forever? Does it start making more cancerous tumors?
And are you suggesting to me, sir, that things can change kinds as long as it involves a loss of information? So it's entirely possible for a human to go into being a bunch of single-celled organisms? Are you saying that's possible?
I'm saying a human can disintegrate into single cell. Each of the cells would then die because they're designed to work together. They rely on a blood supply that something else is producing. So each cell cannot live by its own. If I cut off a piece of my skin, it won't keep living. It'll, even though.
So based on all of that, in particular that last one, in my opinion, it's pretty clear that he's not talking about, denying the cells food. He's talking about removing them from the body and expecting them to live without a blood supply and live on their own. But of course, that's not what he's saying now.
Your question from last debate was, can a cancer cell live outside of a body? You can put it into a mouse's body and it still lives. You didn't take away the nutrients.
Right.
You gave it another host. That's not evolution.
So we're talking about treating it like bacteria, right?
Bacteria wouldn't live without nutrients.
Yeah, I know. That's my point. That's a point on my side.
That's my point, and that's my side. I win.
No, sir, you're not even okay. Let's try this another way. Try this another way.
So now he's kind of going around in a circle and he's trying to frustrate me. I have an idea of another, sort of angle that I can come at this at. And that's another sort of kind of good general idea, is that if you are trying to get an admission, with one sort of line of logic or one line of reasoning, and it's just not working, sometimes it's good to have sort of a second line of reasoning prepared, or sometimes maybe you've got something else that, a different idea in your notes somewhere, and you're like, what, this can be adapted to attack the idea that I'm sort of just not getting through on. And so you kind of just switch gears and you find that other place in your notes. And that's kind of what's going on here. And the other thing that you'll notice that I do is that it takes me some time to find that other spot in my notes that I know can be adapted to attack this idea. And, it would be very easy, considering how long this sort of looks, and I can tell you from experience that however long it looks to you, for me as the person who's flipping through my notes trying to find that right spot, it feels like 100 times longer. But what you'll notice is that I don't get flustered, I don't start to rush, and I don't start to I just sort of take my time, nobody's going anywhere, and it actually isn't that long for the audience. Like, it is long enough that you notice it, but it's not an inordinately long amount of time. It feels like it to the presenter. But the tip here is, look, if you've got another good place to go, and it's going to take a couple of seconds to find it, take a couple of seconds, find it, and continue.
All right, hang on a second here. Okay. So, sir, you'll agree with me that
So in total, it took me about 20 seconds to find that other spot in my notes. And yeah, it's dead air. It is. But, sometimes that is 20 seconds well spent.
things die if they don't have access to food, right?
Well, I plan to live forever in heaven. I don't know what God's going to do about that up there. He promised eternal life to those that would believe on Jesus Christ. I'm not sure how that works. We need food. Don't know.
Okay. Other than that,
okay,
you'll agree with me that all things die if they don't have access to food, right?
This is a good example where you're trying to make a point and you know that something is generally true. And you say, isn't it generally true that blah, blah, blah? And the other person comes up with, well, actually, no, that's not always true. And here's an exception. And it's like the one exception in the world. And it's like this fringe exception. And you're like, look, pretty much always. Like, well, not always. And they can go around and around and around. And this can stymie you. And a really simple way around it is to do exactly what I just did and just say, right, okay, so other than that, what I'm saying is true. And if they come up with a second exception, you can just say, okay, other than that too. Do you have any other exceptions? Maybe they come up with 3 or 4 or 5 and say, okay, other than those 5 exceptions, what I'm saying is true, right?
It certainly appears that way. Everything we've seen, yep, has to have some kind of access to. Some can hibernate quite a long time without it, go into estivation or hibernation. There's several different stages of inactivity that things seem to shut down.
Right. Sir, I mean, you're burning your own time here. You're going to get less time asking questions if you want to wander off topic like this.
So that little shot there is a great one that we use all the time when we're doing depositions or cross-examinations, because the person is there forever. They're there until they finish answering your questions. So the lawyer version is, sir, we have all day and we can set aside further days, and this is going to take a long, long time if you don't give me straight answers. If you give me straight answers, I can get you out of here and get you to, you can go on with your life. But if you insist on fighting me, then, I literally have all day and I have all of tomorrow. Like, I'm doing this, I'm paid to be here, you're not. So, you can waste as much or as little time as you please. And of course, that doesn't always work in a debate. In this situation, of course, Dr. Hovind is supposed to be asking me questions at the end of this. And I've said, look, once we get through my questions, you get to ask yours. And so if you continue to be evasive, then it remains my turn, and it will remain my turn potentially for the rest of the time that we have here. And so that's why it kind of works in this situation. But you have to create that situation by creating a situation where it is the case that this is going to go on longer, or that the whatever limited resource you have is that they want is being used up by them being evasive. In contrast, if you've got only, let's say there's a set amount of time and there's only 10 minutes for cross-examination, if they be evasive for 10 minutes so that you don't get to make progress, then that's a win for them. Or it's something that Dr. Hovind does all the time, is that he will just be evasive for, so you have an hour. And so then if he's evasive for an hour and you get nowhere, then he just declares victory, right? And this debate was set up and the rules were agreed, to be a little bit different. This is round 2 of the same thing and we're going around again. And so his usual tactic of just sort of filibustering it kind of isn't working and is backfiring on him. And I'm reminding him of that. So This can work, but it requires that setup. It requires you to engineer a situation where it makes sense to be able to throw this shot.
So look, not giving cells any food, that doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of testing a prediction, does it?
No, but it makes perfect sense as far as what you said could happen. It's now a new kind because it can live on its own. No, it can't.
Can live on its own and eat bacteria food. Does that help you?
You want to keep feeding the thing.
Yeah, bacteria food. I want to feed it bacteria food. I want to treat it like bacteria. And my premise to you is that if you take if you take a cancer cell and you put it in a petri dish and you don't do anything else other than leave it in that petri dish and it lives just like a bacteria would live, that's a different kind, right?
And if it ate all the food in the petri dish, would it then die? Are you going to come replenish it some more? Are you now the new mother? You're going to keep feeding it?
Sir, do you want to answer my question? Do you want me to ask it again? Do you remember what it was?
So this is a really important and sort of fundamental kind of tactic, or it's not really a tactic, it's technique. In terms of getting your answers, is you got to listen to, you've asked the question and they've said something, and you just kind of got to go, okay, so did what they said answer my question? And if it didn't, then what you need to do is repeat the question, right? Just repeat the question, continue to insist on the answer, and listen to the response, and make sure that they do in fact answer the question. So that is, I would say, the most basic tool in your toolbox to make sure your questions are answered, is just listen to the answer. If it doesn't answer the question, then step one is just repeat the question.
No, I want you to answer mine.
I asked you first, so you answer mine first.
So I hope you guys don't mind me popping in so often with my little comments, but this section is just very rich in terms of technical details. So you can see that this time, so he's answered a question with a question, and now he's trying to turn it around on me and insist on the answer to his question. And I mean, look, you do have to be prepared to answer questions at some point. And of course, that's one of the reasons that we've specifically set time aside for him to ask me questions, but that is not now, right? And you can't allow the other person to derail your questioning just with questions of their own and be like, well, you have to answer my question. And the standard response, in a deposition, the response whenever somebody asks you a question is that you just say, the great thing about this processor is that I get to ask the questions and you get to give the answers. And my question is this, and what's your answer? And you refuse just categorically to answer any questions because that's not your role. Of course, here, that's not true. And so you modify it a little bit, and what you say is, look, I'll answer your questions, but I've asked you a question. I asked you first, so you're going to answer my questions first. Then, if you do want to ask questions, then I'll answer your questions. And you know what? There are people who will say that, but then actually there will never be a time when they will answer your questions. Darth Dawkins, which is a debater who does that, and his questions are a little bit more abusive than they are than mine are, for a variety of reasons, which I may get into at some point. But you should be prepared at some point to answer their questions, but you can't use their desire to ask questions as an excuse to refuse to answer them, especially when you're asking first.
The cell would live in a petri dish maybe until it ran out of food. But you're the one that brought it the food. You're the mother.
That's cool and everything, sir. That wasn't my question. My question was a really simple question.
Okay.
So you agree with me that if a cell is taken out of the body and put in a petri dish and lives indefinitely so long as it has food, that's a different kind than the human or whatever animal it is that it came from, right?
No, I wish you'd stop saying, and you agree with me, because I don't agree with you, okay? No, it is still a human cell extracted from the body. I suppose you could cut off a finger and put it in the right nutrients and make it live for a while, so it wouldn't decay.
Remember that he just said that, because we're going to come back to it in a minute.
They take a person's heart out and keep it alive for a while to put it in somebody else. but it takes a lot of intelligent people to do that in a food supply in a really complex system. So no, it's not a new kind. It's if you take a heart out of the body and keep it alive artificially for a while, is it a new kind? No, it's a human heart.
Okay, now he is really changing his story from last time. And to understand, how big of a change this is, and how much this actually damages his credibility, I want to go back and I want to play for you guys a rather extensive portion of the key moments in the last debate in their full context. So this is going to take a few minutes, but I think it's important to understand what he said last time, because it sort of makes it clear why what he is saying now is so, I don't know, wrong, inappropriate, credibility damaging, odious, however you want to put it.
Okay, let's say my arm suddenly collapsed into being a puddle of goo because all of the cells went back to being single-celled creatures, right? That would be an example of my arm turning into a different kind, right? You're not going to look at that puddle of goo that's just a bunch of single-celled creatures and say like, oh, that's just human, are you?
Incidentally, that's exactly what he's done. So, guess I called that one, trying to tie that one off, which we will see that I do, and he does it anyways. But yeah, that's exactly what I predicted that he might try and do once he was cornered.
Well, your arm could certainly be disintegrated into single cells. Each one would have 46 chromosomes if they're still alive. They would still be recognizable as coming from a human, but each one is not a human. Is your arm a human? No, your whole body is considered human. Again, it's definition of terms. What exactly is a human? But no, all human cells, except for sperm and eggs, have 46 chromosomes. They have 23. Right. And so
regardless of the fact that they're otherwise genetically similar to humans, if all of the cells in my arm just decided we're gonna go back to being single-celled organisms, they would then be a different kind, right? A single-celled organism that's living as a single-celled organism, whether or not it has other genetic similarities to humans, that's a different kind, right?
Well, if all the parts of a car fell apart and I found a bolt on the highway and said, is this a car? Well, this is part of a car, but this is not a car. Together they make a car. All your cells together make an arm. So would we still call each cell an arm? I don't think so, Your Honor.
So he's admitting what I want him to admit, but it's kind of couched in a weird way and it's ambiguous, and so I'm not satisfied in that situation, so I keep going.
All right, so the answer to my question is yes.
No, it was?
Is that why I'm asking you?
If your arm turned into a pile of single cells, would each one
living
be
as single cells, right? Living as single cells.
Well, I don't think they could, but
I know
again, you're off in fairy tale land. This doesn't happen.
In SpongeBob, okay. I just want to know if that happened, right? If that happened, then that would count, right?
I think we would be able to recognize these cells came from a human. Like you can probably recognize that.
You can recognize where they came from. I want to know what they are right now. They're a different kind, right?
No, they're single cells that came from a human.
So you're okay. Well, then why is it ridiculous for me to say that I'm related to an amoeba if you're saying that I am the same kind as a bunch of single cells?
Just as an aside, and I know we're really supposed to be reviewing this debate and not that last debate, but I think that that's a good teachable moment where what I've done is kind of the flip around, right? Where he is now taking a position which is backwards from what he was taking, from the position he was taking before, because it's convenient in this situation, and because he's trying to be difficult. And I'm going, okay, well, if you take that position, then it causes a bunch of problems with the other position that you're trying to take, because it's anathema to those positions. Because if I am the same as a colony of single cells, then how is it that we are different kinds? We must be different kinds if, regardless of how similar we are genetically, if one is a human and one is a puddle of single cells, they must be different. And so that puts him on the horns of a dilemma and forces him to choose one. And of course, he's going to choose the one that I expect him to choose, which is, okay, you're right, those are different kinds. And it's like, okay, good.
I didn't say that. You are made up of probably several trillion single cells that are each really complex, and together they make you. And so that's, I think, amazing. And
Right.
if they went back to single cells, we would call you dead.
Right. So,
Okay.
sir, let me try and look. If evolution were correct, and a human is just a colony of single-celled organisms that were somehow rounded up and given jobs, then it stands to reason that some of those cells, some of the time, ought to go on strike and just say, we don't want to be part of this human anymore. We want to do our own thing and just go back to being unicellular. But we don't see that, right?
You started off with a false definition that a human is a colony of single cells. I think it's way more complex than that. They are designed to fill their function. The lug nuts on my car are designed to hold on the wheel, you know. So I think each of the parts of your body is specially designed to make a human. But again, we don't observe this happening. And you're going backwards from human to single cell. That's disintegration.
So what?
Let's take it from a single cell to human. Where are the examples?
Let's take it this way. Like, I mean, what does it matter whether I'm going this way or that way? You say that I can't do it either way, right? Are you?
No.
You know, let me ask you that question then. Are you suggesting to me, sir, that things can change kinds as long as it involves a loss of information? So it's entirely possible for a human to go into being a bunch of single-celled organisms? Are you saying that's possible?
I'm saying a human can disintegrate into single cell. Each of the cells would then die because they're designed to work together. They rely on a blood supply that something else is producing. So each cell cannot live by its own. If I cut off a piece of my skin, it won't keep living. It'll, even though.
And as we said before, this too is the opposite of what he is arguing now. Remember I told you to keep that thing about the finger in mind? There you go.
And if it did, it would be a different kind, right?
I don't know. I'd be cautious with that answer. It doesn't happen.
Right. I know it doesn't happen, sir. You know what?
Well,
I might have convinced myself here. I might have convinced myself, but I just want to know if it did happen, that would be a different kind, right?
Oh, right here. Sorry, I got the wrong one. If it did happen, I don't know that it would be a different kind. Again, we're back in La La Land again with fairy tale stories, but
well,
so
sir,
what?
I think where we are is in moving goalposts. Whenever we establish something, you know, all of a sudden, if I ask you whether anything qualifies, even the most fantastical example, even a cow jumping over the moon or an arm collapsing into a puddle of cells, you're not willing to say that qualifies as a different kind because you're afraid that I'm going to come up with an example that is exactly that.
Okay, well,
you
go
don't
ahead.
have to be afraid of me, sir. Just answer my
Tell us
question.
the example. The purpose of the debate is for you to give.
Well, here's the problem, sir. If I give you an example of one of those things, then you're going to say, well, that doesn't count, right? I need you to tell me that it counts before I give you an example. So this fantastical example, right? You think it's, you're pretty you're pretty sure it can never happen, right?
What can never happen? Your arm turned to.
Yeah, my arm turns into a puddle of goo. You're not worried about that happening, are you? What's the problem?
No, I assure you it will happen. You will die and your body will disintegrate into single cells, and then they will all disintegrate into atoms, and you're going to be dust one day.
And in the event that those cells did not immediately disintegrate into other atoms, but started multiplying and living on their own as single-celled creatures, in that SpongeBob world, that would count, right?
Wow. I don't know that that's worth even considering. It doesn't happen. It's not observed.
Well, sir, that's my problem. What your problem is that you have to tell me whether or not it would count.
I'd have to. I have to ask for more time to consider that. I don't think would man
Sir,
call it.
We got an hour and 10 minutes. Come on, you've had lots of time.
Would some person call it a different kind? Maybe so. Does that qualify as the biblical definition? I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, according to you, you're the expert. You're the one with the doctorate.
Okay, let me tell you this: would those single cells of your arm be able to reproduce?
Yeah, they're able to reproduce. In this SpongeBob example, they're able to
and turn back to an arm.
No. They're not going to turn back into an arm. They're going to continue to be single-celled organisms from now on.
Yeah. So you're asking me if your arm disintegrated, would the single cells be a different kind? Yeah. By our definition of life forms, I guess we would say a single cell is a different life form than an arm on a human being.
And here is the second instance of him admitting that it would count, that the single-celled creature, which was human, is no longer human, that is a different kind.
But they're not able to bring forth.
Right. No, the cell wouldn't be able to bring forth with the human, obviously. It would be bringing forth just by dividing, right? Like a prokaryote, or not a prokaryote, a single cell organism.
You said earlier going either way, going from multicellular to single cellular, disintegrating, is not the same as saying going from single cellular to multicellular. That's never been observed. It's not science.
I don't care. All I care about is whether or not it's a different kind. So you're telling me, and I just want to nail this down, you're telling me that if cells in my body decided they're not going to cooperate and be part of my body anymore, they're going to do their own thing, they're going to live as single-celled creatures, that's a different kind. Those cells are a different kind, right?
I will give that a qualified yes. To my understanding of your question, Your Honor, I think that is probably a different kind.
Okay, so that's the end of the retrospective. So you can see how long it took me to get that admission, but in the end, I did get a clear admission. And in context, it clearly applies to a situation where a cell leaves a body and it starts living on its own. And I don't think that there's a real, strong mention in that situation of a requirement that it not have any food. So that's the context that we're working with here. Oh, just for those, the eagle eyes among you, there is a point later in the debate where he does say, take the cell out, put it on the floor, and then don't give it any support, and it'll die. And I guess you could interpret that as him having said at some point in the debate, like, don't feed it. But look, guys, number one, I guess whether support includes, making sure that it doesn't have access to food is kind of debatable. And number two, whether or not he said that in the previous debate or not, it's an unreasonable position. If he said it in the previous debate, then it was an unreasonable position then, and it's an unreasonable position now. And I think it's inconsistent with all the other things that he said that I just played for you. So now, just in case it isn't obvious, we are moving back to debate 2. So that's the end of the clips from debate 1. Now we're going to go back to debate 2. So that's the context I wanted to give you.
Same thing with a cell.
So, sir, were you asked the following questions, and did you give the following answers on October 13th, 23?
Here we go.
Question. I just want to nail this down. You're telling me that if cells in my body decided they're not going to cooperate and be a part of my body anymore, they're going to do their own thing, they're going to live as single-celled creatures, that's a different kind. Those cells are a different kind, right? Answer. I will give that a qualified yes. To my understanding of your question, Your Honor, I think that probably a different kind. Were you asked those questions, and did you give those answers, sir?
So this is bread and butter, lawyering, because as you just saw from the clip we just played, his statement.
The cell would live in a petri dish maybe until it ran out of food. But you're the one that brought it the food. You're the mother.
That's cool and everything, sir. That wasn't my question. My question was a really simple question.
Okay.
So you agree with me that if a cell is taken out of the body and put in a petri dish and lives indefinitely so long as it has food, that's a different kind than the human or whatever animal it is that it came from, right?
No, I wish you'd stop saying, and you agree with me, because I don't agree with you, okay? No, it is still a human cell extracted from the body. I suppose you could cut off a finger and put it in the right nutrients and make it live for a while, so it wouldn't decay.
Contradicts his previous testimony. So what you do in that situation is you commit the witness to their previous statement, and I think the statement I just played for you is fairly clear, and then you read to them what they previously said. And then first thing you do is you make sure that they confirm that they said it. That's what I'm trying to do first. That's step 1.
That's why I gave it a qualified yes. But if you're going to keep feeding...
Were you asked those questions and did you give those answers? Yes or no?
you were asked, I was asked
Sir,
those
did
questions.
you give those
I'm going to
answers,
jump in,
yes
Mr.
or no?
Anderson, please. I want to have a good,
All right,
clean,
get
fair
him to
debate.
answer the question then.
I just want to point out, if you disagree with something, Mr. Anderson, this is what I want to do from now on. Can't you finish your thoughts, note down what you disagree with in his answer, then respond. If Kent,
Okay.
and then other way around too. I think that's the best way to be fair. So Kent, go ahead, and then we'll throw it back to Mr. Anderson.
So a couple of things here. The first one is you notice how firm I'm being with him. And that's because like impeachment is a serious thing, right? Where we're saying like, look, you said this before, now you're saying that now. You know, you're saying X before, you're saying not X later. And, you know, those things are inconsistent. And so it's, you know, this is a very sort of methodical, rigid thing that you're doing when you're trying to impeach a witness directly with respect to their previous testimony. Like it is, you know, you are going to like, there's no like, oh, well, blah, 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 you know, like, no, you are going to answer these questions. The question I am asking you is not about what you meant. It is about what you said. Tell me that I am correct and agree with me that that is what you said. That is the question, and that is the only question. So that, you know, that firmness here, like that is the reason for it, is that we brook no nonsense when we're impeaching the credibility of a witness. The second thing here is that Donnie's interference here is inappropriate. So, I mean, look, Donnie is usually pretty good when it comes to moderating debates. He does tend to always throw to Kent to give him the opportunity to change the subject when he's in trouble. He does sometimes sail in to try and save witnesses, which can be irritating, but generally speaking, at least in my debates with Kent, he is, you know, relatively hands-off in an appropriate fashion, because I don't tend to step out of line very much. And, you know, if I'm cutting a witness off or I'm, you know, insisting on an answer, then there's usually a good reason for it. And he usually kind of lets me go when I'm being appropriate. But here, yeah, he's coming in. This is not appropriate. He's interfering with a, you know, an important aspect of this questioning. So that's the other thing that's going on. And you'll see how I deal with that.
I think this shows clearly the desperation evolutionists have to make a new kind to prove the Bible wrong. If you take the cells of your arm and disintegrate it and keep the cells alive in a petri dish, that's not a new kind. If it can keep alive on its own, do it. Throw it out in the woods, and it grows into something new. I might think about that one. But no, I did not agree that it's a new kind and it violates the Bible kind by you're disintegrating your arm cells, and each cell is able to live in a petri dish. You didn't mention petri dish last time. If you take the cells of your body away from your body, they will die. Okay, they die. There are no examples of a cell coming out of one organism and going into something new on its own. It has to have a new host or somebody to feed it food in the petri dish. You guys are so desperate to believe your dumb religion of evolution. I wish you could see it. Go ahead.
So, Donnie, this is why I interrupted Dr. Hovind, because none of that was responsive to my question. So I trust that you'll appreciate now why I interrupted him. So now, sir.
So you see what I did there? I didn't respond to Kent. I responded to Donnie, because the most important thing there was that Donnie was being inappropriate with respect to that moderation. And you could see exactly why, because Kent just started to ramble and he started to say a bunch of other stuff that wasn't truly on topic, and he started to try and insult me, you know, and that's another, like, you know, oh, you're so desperate. And it's like, no, I'm not desperate. That would have been a success for him. Or, you know, your religion is stupid. It's not a religion. That would have been a success for him, right? So I'm not biting on any of those little breadcrumbs that he's trying to sprinkle before me to lead me away from the fact that he has just been caught directly in a direct lie, right? So my response is, Donnie, this is why I am being firm with Kent, because he's trying to be evasive. So when he's directly trying to be evasive in respect of having been caught with a direct lie, yeah, I'm firm, and I hope you'll back off. And so that's, you know, that's a little speech, and then I just go right back into, did you ask those questions, and did you give those answers?
Once again, did you give those answers? Were you asked those questions, and did you give those answers on October 13th, 2023?
I think if you'll listen carefully to my answer on October 13th, I said I'll give that a qualified yes.
Okay.
Didn't I?
So the
I
answer
say a
to my
qualified yes?
question. Sorry, go ahead.
Did I read it back to me? I've got it in my script here too. Did I say I will give that a qualified yes? I have
You
to
said,
requalify.
I will give that a qualified yes to my understanding of your question, Your Honor. I think
Okay.
that probably a different kind.
Right. I
That's what
think
you said.
I thought at that time your question was, if you take it away, can it live on its own and become a new kind? The answer now would be no. It has to have another host to live off of, or somebody to babysit it and feed it new food in the petri dish. If you're going to keep feeding it and taking care of it, it's not a new kind. Can it live on its own? No.
So sir,
no, you're really desperate to make a new kind out of a cell off your arm. It's not a new kind. It's a human cell. It started off with incredible complexity, 46 chromosomes with enough DNA code to go from here to the moon. And you think it happened by chance? And by the fact that you can get it to live in a petri dish now makes it a new kind and proves evolution?
No, sir, I'm not trying to prove evolution. As you well know, because I've told you that, I don't know, 4 times. But and this, again, Donnie, is why I was being stern with Dr. Hovind. So, sir, were you asked those questions and did you give those answers?
I wasn't.
You see how he kind of tried to, he's trying to sort of retcon his answer, right? And sort of say that what he meant was something else. And I mean, you know what? That is allowed, like that is fair, and that is probably the best thing to do in a situation where you're faced with a previous statement, and especially if it's taken out of context. But I think in this situation, you can see, having seen the whole lead up to that answer, that in context, that's not what he meant at all. So, you know, what he's trying to do now is sort of try and change the entire context of his answer in order to run here. Now, I mean, in retrospect, perhaps what I should have done is that I should have gone back and I should have read to him like reams and reams and reams of the context so that that was all read into the record. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that you might do in a trial, but I'm not even sure whether you would do that. Like, the problem is that, again, we have a limited amount of time. The audience has a limited amount of attention. And so, like, I chose the sort of the end, the point when he finally did agree. Because as you saw, like, he went around and around and around however many times before I finally got him to give me that admission that, yes, it does count. It is a different kind. And so, like, this tactic by him in the context of a debate is a good one and is an effective one. I mean, if this were in a trial, or even now that we're kind of watching this on YouTube in retrospect, and we can sort of play the whole thing, it loses its effectiveness. And that's because then the person, you know, what ultimately happens is, see, the reason that you do this kind of, putting the contradiction to the person is so that they have the opportunity to explain the contradiction. And if that explanation were true and I was taking it out of context, then like this would be the perfect response. The fact that it's not true and that he's trying to sort of like rejigger it sort of bites him kind of, or would bite him in a trial at the end, because then he loses even further credibility because of sort of the obvious retconning that is going on. Retroactive continuity changing is that's what that's short for. But, you know, he's trying to sort of rewrite the past and say that that's not what he meant, when if you look at it in context, like, that is what he meant. And so, you know, he looks worse than in the end because he's doing this. But in the moment, and if you haven't seen all of that, you know, it does work and it is effective. So what I'm trying to do, and what you'll see I do in a moment, is I'm just going to try and tie him back down to the new answer and try a bit of a different tactic. Instead of like directly trying to force a contradiction, and show that he's lying, is that I'm just going to get him to try and adopt his previous testimony and say, like, look, regardless of whether or not what you said before is true or what you said now is true, I want you did say those things, and I want you to agree that they were truthful, that what you said then was truthful. And so that's where I'm going to go next.
asked those questions. To my recollection, I gave the answer that it would be qualified.
And were those answers truthful?
They were truthful, and they're still truthful.
Okay, and you adopt them today.
Yes.
You adopt them today, right?
Your question was not truthful, though.
Sir,
you didn't say
Guys, there's a little bit of crosstalk. Let's make sure that the audience can hear both.
You did not say it could live with
when I'm asking you a
babysit
question, sir. And you adopt those answers today, right?
I will clarify it for you. I'll clarify my qualifications. If a cell could be taken out of a body and live with nobody babysitting it, nobody feeding it, and turns into something different, I think that might be something to consider. It's never happened. I mean,
so now he's established our new path, right? When nobody's babysitting it and nobody is taking care of it, if it can live on its own, then it will be a new kind. So unfortunately for him, we're going to get into examples where precisely that happens. But I'm not quite done with the Gila and the Petri dish stuff yet. So we're going to, be coming back to that first. But, now that he's said that, inadvertently now he's given us sort of a roadmap to, further problems for him down the road.
If a cow could jump over the moon, what would happen? It's a fairy tale story. You're not helping your evolution theory at all. You're showing that you're so desperate to make a new kind out of a cell that comes off your arm. Why is this so important to you?
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
Why is it so important to you? Are you trying to prove the Bible wrong? They said they bring forth after their kind. A cancer cell out of a human put into a mouse is still a cancer cell. It still has a host. That's not helping the theory. You guys believe the amoeba came from a rock up by itself. And the amoeba turned into all kinds of things. So that amoeba had to grow arms, legs, wings, heart, lungs, all kinds of new features.
Sir, we're not even talking about that right now. So I'm going to try and bring it back to, hey, come on, I let you talk. Don't interrupt me.
So this is a good example where, I was going to say something, but then I said, you know what, I shouldn't be just interrupting somebody for no reason. I'm going to give him a little bit of rope, and you can see that he wasn't truly expecting that, and he just started to go and he starts to ramble, and he throws out the desperate thing and he's trying to get me to react, and then when I don't, he just starts sort of talking, and which is another tactic that he likes to use, which is just he will just keep talking. If you let him, he will fill the air, and just say lots and lots and lots of things, many of which are wrong. And so once it becomes clear that that's what he's doing, I have to cut him off and I have to bring him back to the discussion at hand. And so that's something that you guys have to remember to do. Just because the other person's talking, you don't necessarily need to let them talk forever. If they're, what they're saying is not on topic, bring them back to the topic.
We need to have a clean transcript here, sir. We have an audience that's trying to listen to us. Okay. So, sir, I put it to you that if a cancer cell can live in the same manner as bacteria, that it is living as a single-celled creature. Would you agree with that?
So what I'm trying to do here is I want to set things up so that we can talk about HeLa cells. And he probably has an inkling that something like that is coming, but he doesn't know about it yet, right? And so I want to establish that something living this truly different lifestyle, living as bacteria, living as a single-celled organism, is not doing those things that it does when it is a mammal, that it is, it's living a different life. It's a different thing. And that's the reason that's important here, is to try and set things up for the specific examples that we're going to be going into, in particular, in this case, the HeLa cells. So now I'm going to try one more time to try and get that stuff. And the way that I'm going to go about doing it is, he won't agree. He's deliberately misunderstanding everything I say. So I'm going to break it down to him. I'm going to break it down as simply as I possibly can to try and get little bits and pieces out of him. I usually do that anyways, but now because he's being this difficult, I'm going to try and turn it up to 11.
Not if you have to keep babysitting it and feeding it. It's not living on its own at all.
All right.
Like a kid that's 35 still living at home.
That's not my question. My question was, would you agree with me that if a cell is living in the same manner as bacteria is living, that that cell is living as a single-celled creature?
I don't think so. I don't know
No?
enough about that. A cancer cell, I don't think it's ever been seen to happen. It always have to have a host right away.
But if it did happen, sir, if it did happen, then that would mean that cell is living as a single-celled creature, right?
So let me rephrase. Let's see. If you kiss a frog and it turns to a prince, that would be true.
No, we're not kissing frogs right now, sir. We're talking about if a single-celled creature, if a single cell is living in the same manner as bacteria, then that's that cell living as a single-celled creature, right?
I don't think, well, living in the same manner as a bacteria, even they have to be fed and have to have a host or they die.
No, I know. That's not my question. My question was very simple.
No, it's
Can
not
you
very
do me
simple.
in simpler words? Did you catch it? If a cell, you know what a cell is, right?
I do indeed.
Somebody later pointed out to me in the comments that that was like a really subtle insult to him because he has been to prison, but that was not my intention. I was just talking about, cells in animals.
Okay, so a cell is living in the same way as bacteria. You know what bacteria is?
I do.
Okay, so imagine that cell living in the same manner as the bacteria. You got that so far?
Got it.
Okay. Isn't it true that that would mean that cell is living like a single-celled creature?
It would be living as long as somebody feeds it and supplies it the nutrients. It is not a new creature.
That wasn't my question either, sir. I'm not sure why you're having trouble with this. Let's go back again.
I'm not having trouble at all, sir. I'm understanding clearly what you're trying to do. Okay.
Well, I think you might be struggling a little bit with the idea of answering a question that you don't like.
To take a cell that's already complex beyond the space shuttle and take it away from its host and give it a new host, either it would be a petri dish or something else, you didn't create anything. That's not a new kind.
I'm not trying to create anything. I'm not trying to create a darned thing. Is darned okay? I don't want to swear in front of your audience.
So I'll go back and say my qualified answer would be if you took a cell out of a body and kept it alive in some other way, it'd be similar to taking a heart out of somebody and keeping it alive for a while. It's still a human heart. They kept it alive for a few hours till they could do a transplant. That's modern medicine. That's amazing. Yeah. But it was already alive.
I mean,
I'll tell you what. So why don't you take a dead cell out of a body and make something out of it?
How about this, sir? How about we take a live cell out of a body and put it in a petri dish?
You're already miles ahead of where you ought to be on this. You want to start with a living cell?
So you got to give Hovind credit here. Like, he is good at evading. Like, I should have, I'm still on topic, right? And I'm still asking questions connected to that question. But like, looking back at this is one of those instances where I'm like, God, you know what? I should have, that question was really, really broken down, and he knew the answer and he was refusing to give it. And he was, just dodging around and trying to evade it. He's trying to get away. That question's a killer. And in the end, he kind of slips away there, like a little bit, not fully, right? Like we're still talking about it, and we're still ultimately gonna be, banging on that concept. But like that particular question, like props to the guy. He got away, man.
I want to start with a cell that is part of a human body, and then I want to turn that cell into a single-celled creature that's living like it's bacteria. That's what I want to do.
Okay,
and I want you to admit that if parts of my body go from living as part of me to living like bacteria, that's a different kind. But I think you struggle with that because so when you said that to me before, when you said that that if part of my arm were to go, if the cells in my arm were to go and live as single-celled creatures, that would count, that would be a different kind.
Go back and read my answer. I said
I'll give that truthful, right?
I said I'll give you a qualified yes. Now, a question.
Yeah, to the extent of your understanding. You said, I'll give that a qualified yes to my understanding.
Okay. Why are you spending another hour?
Is there a change in your understanding, sir?
Well, yeah, you're spending an hour in this fairy tale world that if this happened, do you play a lot of video games? You live in a fairy tale world? Look, it doesn't
I
happen.
don't actually.
Oh,
No.
good. Right. Me neither.
No.
Good. Okay. So no.
No, I live in the real world, sir.
Me too.
And I'm
The real
asking you
world.
to join me in that real world. And
Oh,
I'm
I've
asking
been in it.
you
I've
to,
been
I'm
in it the
asking
whole
you to
time, sir.
acknowledge, sir. I'm asking you to acknowledge your previous statement.
So you can see, like, in this situation, like, he's still trying to slip away. I mean, you know, from the larger sort of concept, right? And he's trying to change it to like video games and like, you know, make this, I don't know, some kind of a generation war or something like that. And like, no, you know, I'm wily enough to not fall for that kind of malarkey, right? No, we're not going to talk about video games and whether or not I live in fairy tale land, and you're not going to insult me away from, you know, from me exploring this concept. We're still talking about whether or not your previous statement was truthful, like, because that's what I care about. I care about you acknowledging that you already agreed that if something's living like bacteria, that it is living a completely different life and that it's a different kind. So, you know, no, we're not going to be diverted by any of those things.
So were you being truthful with me then?
I try to always be truthful. You're not even truthful about your name.
Now, this one requires a little bit of explanation. So what's going on here is that in his presentation, you couldn't see it in the replay here because I had Donnie remove it, but there's a moment in there where it clips. You don't need to see where it is, but there's a moment in there where it clips, and that's because the clip that was taken out was Hovind doxing me and putting my real name and a whole bunch of information about me right up on the screen. And he did that on purpose to throw me off. And I know that he did that on purpose because, like, before we started, he also had my real name up there on the screen. And I said, hey, I don't really want my real name, you know, out there on the internet. You know, can you take that down? And he said, oh, sure. Yeah, no, sorry about that. And then immediately, like, threw it back up, and not just the name, but like a whole bunch of other details as well. So like he knew that I didn't want that, and then he did it on purpose to throw me off, and then now he's bringing it up saying, oh, you're not even truthful about your name. I know your real name, and I told everybody what it is. And he's doing that because I am really pressing him here, and because he does not like that he gave that previous admission that yes, this counts, and that now he knows that there are real examples. So he's lashing out. And you know, he's like, ha ha ha, like, I'm doing something that I know you don't like. So let's see how I deal with that.
Go ahead.
Well, sir, I understand that you're very angry about being put in this uncomfortable position. I understand that it's uncomfortable for you,
no,
but there's
I'm
no
fine.
reason to lash out at me. I mean, I don't think it's a really big deal. I was trying to, you know, okay. I wanted to pseudonym, but it's not really a big deal. So look, I think you're a lot more uncomfortable right now than I am, but
no, I'm fine.
Oh, you're fine. Good. Perfect. So
I do want to say, gentlemen, we are 40 minutes in. So at this point,
I know, sir. So look, like I said, you know, my intention was for Dr. Hovind to be able to ask me questions, but we're not even getting off the starting block. So here, let me move.
So as you guys can see, there's a lot to this debate. We're only 40 minutes in terms of the timeline in the debate, and we're already, I think, over an hour and a half in terms of debate plus commentary. So I think I'm going to break this up into multiple parts. This is probably a good place to stop. And next time we will get into the Gila, the Gila example. Because at this point here in the real debate, what happened was that I went, okay, you know what? I think I've kind of made my point. Now Donnie is getting ticked at me for belaboring this. And that's probably a good indication that the audience is getting sick of me, belaboring it. And, like I said, if this is a deposition, like, that wouldn't matter to me. It would just get dragged on and on and on till I get what I want, and you're gonna give it to me, or else you're not going anywhere. But, when there is somebody that you are playing to, whether that be a judge or a jury, or in this case, an audience, you have to be cognizant of the fact that their attention itself is a limited resource, and that you want to spend that judiciously. So I kind of made the decision in this moment to move on and sort of just get into the meat of Gila, and we'll kind of, I guess, clean the rest of that up as we go. And I guess that's where we're going to leave it here for today. So what I want to say to you guys is, I've had some incredible growth in the channel thus far. I thank everybody who has subscribed and has watched and shared the videos, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that you tune in for the next segment. If you want to see the whole video, like the whole debate, just sort of uncut with without commentary, it is available on my channel, so you don't have to go anywhere else. You can look at it now. But if you want to see this broken down with more commentary, then stay tuned. Please do like the video, subscribe, so you don't miss the next continuation, and I will see you guys all next time. Thanks again.